Hi there, everybody. Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. We're going to be talking about a new book. It's Beanpickers, and it's written by Karen Foresti Hempson.
Right.
And we welcome you to the show. Good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Boy, you had a great turnout at the United County History Center. There was almost 150 people there.
Yes. I'm amazed at how many beanpickers there still are, or beanpicker families who, like me, have heard all the stories.
The bean picking in the Utica area back in what years are we talking about? Was the height of it?
Well, and with my family, the bean picking took place probably around the turn of the century, the 20th century, all the way into the 30s and 40s.
And there was ethnicity to this too, wasn't there? A lot of Italians were bean pickers.
Yes.
And what was the other? There were other groups that were.
Yes, there were Poles and Russians, and you know the story is kind of universal because with my family it's bean picking, but with other families in upstate New York it could be onions or potatoes. So, but the stories are kind of the same.
And you've picked out individual stories to tell the story of bean picking, and we'll talk about those in just a second. What gave you the thought to do this, Karen?
It's always been a part of my childhood, their stories, because just some family members talked so much about it. Maybe because I was the type that listened. I had 23 cousins on one side and about 30 cousins on the other side, and whenever we had family get-togethers, which was quite often, I would be the one that would just sit there and listen to them. For some reason, I had this sense of history from when I was little, and those stories stayed with me. And it wasn't until I was an adult that I realized how absolutely compelling these stories really are as you get farther and farther away from the 20th century. Like my parents were born 100 years ago, so time has just gone by so much that now we realize how unique these stories are.
Were the people that did the bean picking, were they doing this to supplement their income, or were they doing it to live?
Both. Both. The bean picking, as you know, was only in the summer. So without the bean picking, they probably would not have enough money, for example, for coal. So it would be enough to buy them coal for the winter to heat their homes. Another family in Syracuse had bought a house. It helped pay the principal on their mortgage. So it was definitely a supplemental. And the fathers usually did not go. They would send their wives and the kids in the trucks to the farm fields, and they would stay back and work in the brickyards, on the railroad, and construction. And they would try to get there through the trucks on weekends. There were no cars or buses or anything, so they would have to wait for the truck to get them.
And we'll talk about some of the locations. In fact, there used to be down on, let's see, what would that be, 12B maybe? There was, you could see the remnants of where the bean pickers would stay, yes?
Yes, in Deansboro. And the farmer, as a matter of fact, his family's still into farming now, generations later. He owned a lot of land in Deansboro and in Vernon. And to us, it's so close to Utica, but to immigrants who had no means of travel, it was very far away. So they had to stay in the shacks and the outskirts of town in Deansboro or Vernon.
The people that did this had to be pretty physically fit.
Good question. I don't remember my grandparents ever getting sick. They lived in their 90s.
Yeah, I mean, my point was this was not easy work.
It was not easy work. And I spoke to some fourth graders, and that was one of their questions. Like, well, what did they do when they got a sore throat? What did they do when they got sick? And I guess there wasn't much they could do. There was no doctor on the premises, and you're right. I think they pretty much stayed healthy. They ate all the vegetables that they wanted there. So that's how they survived out there too, was eating the vegetables. And the father would bring goods every weekend, like flour and sugar and things like that.
The families that did this, some of them if I'm correct, would go, they commuted. They would go and they'd spend the day picking beans and they'd come back home.
Yes.
But others that came from distances would stay right on the property.
Correct. That's
Yeah.
right. And bean picking, like I said, is all over upstate New York. And in Cortland, where I lived there for 40 years, that was the case because the bean fields are right in the center of town. So the truck would still pick them up, but they still got to go back home at the end of the day.
And didn't you get some pickers too that would come from the south and then come up to this area? And
That's correct. Scranton, Pennsylvania. Some of them came from Watertown. The one thing that I learned was during the war, during the 40s, this was a secret, and it was a well-kept secret until after the war. But the Cortland people knew about it, is the United States government did not know what to do with all their German POWs, their prisoners of war. So I did some research on that, and they brought 450,000 German POWs to the United States and put them in the fields. And they picked right along next to the Cortland people.
Had one of those POW camps right in Utica, and they would ship them down to the fields. It was over on Seward Ave, not too far from Shinatries.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And that was their job, was
Yeah.
to go pick the beans. They said they never had a problem with it. Was there ever any problems at these camps, people?
From what I've talked to, and I spoke to some very elderly people, and there were some women, some families, a lot of the families brought their young kids with them to pick beans. They stayed away from the POWs. But this one boy, I'm going to call him a boy, he's now about 87 years old. When he was 15, he was put in charge of them in the bean plant. And he had to, through sign language, because neither knew each other's language, and he had to tell them how to put the beans down the chute, how to put them in the cans and package them in boxes. And so, and he said he never saw a guard anywhere.
Interesting.
Yeah.
When we come back, we'll talk about some of the families that you portray in your book and how you pick those families. Beanpickers. It's the new book. It's for sale at the United County History Center, $20. Includes tax. Short break, right back.